Hey there, Mila Political here. I'm going to talk today about why trans people aren't a fad, and I'm going to be doing it by sort of demonstrating through narratives that, you know, we don't choose to be trans because it's like fun and cool and like trendy. It's actually not. There are, it's just, it feels so much better to express ourselves for who we are. And the reason why I want to talk about this is that there's a book that is very much framing the existence of trans men and AFAB non-binary people as being a trend and being an agenda that is tricking the youth, these children of concerned parents into becoming trans, right? Choosing to be trans. Um, I'll talk about that today. I'm not going to talk about the book though. You can find more information about that on my Twitter, and I'm probably going to put together a little email petition thing for the libraries to take that book down because it really has to go. Um, but yeah, so I'm going to start. I'm going to go through each of these vague, generalized groupings: trans women, trans men, and non-binary people, and sort of talk about some very specific things about why it's not fun to be trans. It just feels better. There's like a sense of true self in it. Um, I will start with trans women because I'm a non-binary trans woman. So I have a bit of trans woman's narrative, a unique one to myself. Yeah, being a trans feminine person, a trans woman, is, you know, not that fun usually. Like we make it fun for ourselves because we love ourselves and who we are, and we really cherish being able to be ourselves usually. But it's not super fun. Um, the moment I came out, I faced very horrific emotional violence threats from a roommate who I was living with. Not fun. People stopped listening to me the same way, right? Um, the reason it's so much better than identifying as a man was because identifying as a man was kind of torturous. It's essentially like you're taking my true identity and erasing it and forcing me to be something I'm not. And that is honestly, it's a form of torture. So, you know, it's not fun to be a woman because there's all kinds of misogyny. And it's not fun to be a trans woman because there's all kinds of trans misogyny. I've been called aggressive, which I feel all women are familiar with that one. I've been called a tinfoil hat for calling out transphobia, so that's a bit trans misogynistic, but I'm sure cis women have been called tinfoil hats or similar terms for, calling out misogyny in general. I've also received death threats just for being trans. So, yeah, that's a whole other ball of worms that even cis women deal with sometimes. But like I got death threats before I even really started making this effort to be like to have some kind of YouTube thing, right? I'm not famous even now. Like I'm not popular. I've gotten death threats. So yeah, not fun. It's not a choice. I didn't choose to be trans. I just, you know, I decided it wasn't even a choice. No, it's easier to not erase who I am and not live in horrific depression and anxiety, um, along with having my identity erased. Um, yeah, trans men, obviously, I can't really speak to the narrative of trans men. I've had some conversations about this though, and I've done a little bit of reading. So what I'm going to offer you is limited by that capacity, but like trans men do deal with toxic masculinity. And I think this is actually a pretty interesting issue to address because like toxic masculinity is an issue that men need to address. But trans men can't actively address that without also endangering themselves because you have to out self, a trans man would have to out themselves to their cohorts. And if they did that, if it's a very toxic atmosphere, that could put them in actual physical danger, definitely emotional danger. Um, yeah. So, like, there are these pressures to be even more like cis people than cis people are expected to be when you're trans. And I think it's just as bad for all trans people, but binary trans people are pressured so much to be passing and to fit the stereotype of what it means to be a binary gender, more so just to prove themselves, right? And that's not fun, right? Cis people get to be themselves however they want, but trans people are generally cordoned into tighter boxes. Non-binary people, lastly, I also have a narrative, personal narrative to this. As someone who is not binary, I didn't really speak to the pressures to uh, be perfectly feminine as a non-binary woman, but that is something even I get pressured into, and I have the excuse of being, well, no, I'm non-binary. Like that's something I can like lean on, but also like non-binary people in general are often even erased by other queer people, other trans people. Um, it's not super fun to be non-binary because the whole world is expecting you to fit into a box. And being non-binary, like you're just it's just you don't fit into a box. And I lean very heavily towards the feminine side, and honestly at some point maybe I will pass as a cis woman, like just visually, just because that's I have those sorts of dysphorias that might lead me hopefully to like being able to pass a little bit, but I don't really want to pass. I want to be me. I don't want to be cis. Like I actively don't want to be cis. And so yeah, non-binary people get very we get bullied often for just not quite fitting the narrative that binary people expect, right? So no. So obviously you can see just from those simple things, it's far more complex than that. But those simple things, trans men, trans women, non-binary people, we all face these uh, very serious issues where it's not fun to be us. We just, it's less fun. It's less not, it's more not fun to pretend we're not us. That's really where it's at, right? That's nobody's stealing your daughters, right? Sorry about the blinks. That was my phone. I'm not really going to edit this too much. I'm going to put some overlaying text everywhere. Um, Tell me if you like that. Yeah. Anyways, I want to end this with a couple notes. Often people will cite things like detransition. It happens sometimes, and that's fine. It's very small percentage. Far more people alleviate some very serious depression and are still on this earth because they transitioned. Um, and most detransitions are, in fact, if you look at the research, they're in fact actually about people trying to remain safe. So they might be in communities that are ostracizing them for being trans. So if they detransition, they get community back. And we're communal centered beings. We can't survive without community very well. So, for some people it's just worth it to go back in the closet, at least for a little bit. Additionally, some people do that for safety. If it's a very dangerous community that they're in, and detransitioning might allow them to stay at home without getting kicked out, might stop abuse that results from being transgender, like in having in an anti-trans or transphobic space, right? So I'm framing that not as like the person's fault, but like the space is the problem. Um, yeah. And also, I want to point out some of the language I've used today has been about, we don't choose to be transgender. And I want to make sure that that isn't confused for transmedicalist narratives because What I'm talking about when I say we don't choose is that there is a neurological element to our identity. Our brain, uh, our gender is stored a little bit in our brain. It's also cultural, right? So there are certain genders that I can't identify as because I am not of the culture they're from. So there are cultural elements. There's social elements like how we interact with each other, how we dress, things like that. No two cis people, like two cis women, they don't dress exactly the same, right? But, there are social elements to gender expression too. But there is somewhat a neurological element to gender expression, and that's provable because kids tend to develop their sense of gender around the same age. If you look at the research, uh, between the ages of 3 to 6, this stuff is pretty easy to research, so I'm probably not going to cite it. I want to try to get a video out more frequently. Um, in the future, if more people subscribe to my Patreon, I might be able to hire on some people to help me do more research. But while I'm in school, I'm gonna try to do some more quick videos that I don't have to put as much work in, just so I can get more content out. Anyways, so yeah, transmedicalism, not cool. It's a term you can look up. It basically talks about how uh, it's the idea that you have to use medical procedures to be transgender. The only biological component to being one gender or the other is in your brain. It's your neurology. That's it. So thank you to my patrons, Justine and the Blue Druid. Definitely, if you want to check out my Patreon and subscribe, please do. I would like to keep making these videos and keep talking about cool things. I do plan to put out a video soon about uh, oh, what's that game called? Anyways, I've talked about it in my previous videos. It's Stardew Valley, and the way gift economies function in there. Um, and I want to put out some more videos like this if this works for you. So please let me know in the comments if this is cool. And yeah, so thank you so much. You can also check out my all my links for all my social media. And yeah, I will see you later.